and share my screen. All right. I can get where I can see the chat. All right, so welcome everyone. This is the third installment in our grant application information meetings. Today's meeting, we'll be going over much more detailed information about the Cohort 27 grant application. We will be going over some information that we've already gone over in our last meeting. If you were not there, I highly recommend that you go and view that meeting. You can find that at our YouTube channel, which is listed here. And please excuse the way I'm sharing my screen. This is just the easiest way for me to do it and be able to see the chat and all of that. It's still not easy, but we're trying to figure it out. My name is Amanda Ryland. I'm the state coordinator for 21st Century for Alabama. Other team members are here either listening in or participating. They are Dr. Melissa McKinney, Dr. Kelly Smith, and Ms. Carla Wright. And then we have our administrative assistant, Ms. Nia Marshall. Here is our contact information. We do have a new 21st Century website with ALSDE. It is a Google site, and the address is located here at the bottom of your screen. If you have not had the chance to do so, please be sure to use this QR code to join our Cohort 27 listserv. I'll give you a second to scan that with your phone. And then at the end of the meeting, we can put the link in the chat in case any of you do not have the ability to scan that with your phone. You may be watching from your phone. All right, we're going to move extremely fast today. And so if I covered it in the last meeting, I'm probably not going to cover it very extensively today because you can go back and watch the last meeting. But also this is being recorded, so you will be able to go back and look at these slides more carefully after the meeting in case I've gone too fast. I'll try to pace myself, but we have 2 hours to cover a huge amount of information. And I can't stay late today because my daughter is marching in our town's Christmas parade this afternoon. And so I'm already going to be running late for that. So we're going to try to end promptly on time at 5:30 today. All right, here's information about the Nita M. Lowy 21st Century Community Learning Center grant. I'm not going to read this to you guys. We've gone over it before. This is our timeline for the RFA. Again, we've gone over this before. This is the link here for the last meeting, and you can find this timeline and these links on the 21st Century website. So you can go to that and find those there. Here's the next continuation of the timeline. One thing to point out is that we do hope that the virtual portal will open in January 19th. That's when we hope that you'll be able to start submitting your applications. And the grant will be due on February 27th, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. The actual RFA itself is being routed, and that can take quite some time, but we will keep you guys up to date as to when it is released, and we'll make sure that we get that out to that listserv as soon as it's been approved and released so that you will have detailed information about the grant. But this presentation today is going over a lot of what is in the grant, and so you can use it to go ahead and start planning your needs assessment and start writing your answers to the questions that will be in the grant itself. I doubt that there will be any changes, but we will let you know if anything does end up getting changed as it goes through the routing process. That is a possibility, but normally that doesn't really happen. So you should be safe in going with what is in today's presentation when you're writing your grant. Okay. We hope to have those grant winners announced sometime in late April, early May. But again, please keep in mind that this timeline is subject to change due to unforeseen delays that could occur. And as any changes occur, we will make sure that we update that timeline on the 21st Century website. All right, here is the purpose of the 21st Century Grant. I'm not going to read through this because we've gone through it before. General funding information has not changed. We expect to award somewhere between 9 and 11 million. The grant awards will range from 50,000 to 350,000 per site. And this will be a 4-year grant this time, and you can apply for a year-long grant, academic year only, or summer only program. But if you do apply for a summer only program, it would not begin until the summer of 2027. General funding information, this is pretty much the same as what we discussed in the last meeting. Your first year budget would actually start on October 1st, but you would be expected to start your programs on the first full week of school, the first day of the first full week of school. And so in order to do that, you may have to complete, if you get the grant, you may have to complete a Cohort 27 pre-award cost application as early as July 1st. We will, if you get the grant, of course, we will give you instructions on how to do that. Just wanted to make everybody aware that that is a possibility. And just understand that all applicants should have at least 3 months of operating funds at their disposal, because payments are made on a cost reimbursement basis. And so you submit your expenses after they have occurred, and then you are reimbursed for those expenses. And sometimes that can take some time. And so you should have at least 3 months of operating funds to your disposal to take care of any expenses before you get reimbursed. All right. The way you can determine your the amount of funds that you're eligible for is by using this formula. The formula is that you will take the number of participants you plan to serve, multiply that times the number of program hours you plan to serve them for, and then multiply that times $6. This will give you your grant award, the amount of your that you're eligible for your grant award, maximum being $350,000. So if you do this formula and it says you qualify for $450,000, then just understand that the max that you can receive in this grant is $350,000, unless you get the additional funds for transportation, and we'll discuss that in a moment. So here's an example. If you said that you plan to serve 100 participants for 300 program hours and multiply that times $6, then your grant would be eligible for $180,000. Another example, let's say that you're just doing a summer only program and you want to just serve 50 participants for 75 program hours during the summer. You multiply that times $6, and the eligible amount would be $22,500. Now, the issue with this one, you would not be awarded the grant with this one, because the federal regulations state that all awards must be a minimum of $50,000. And so you need to make sure that you serve the number of participants and the number of program hours required to at least give you the eligibility for $50,000 in order to be awarded this grant. You must keep accurate attendance records. And just letting you guys know, I'm going to answer questions at the end, but I'm not going to answer questions during the presentation today, just because we have to go so fast. So I'm sorry, but I will address your questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you guys so much. You can go ahead and ask them. I'm just not going to necessarily answer them unless it's just a quick yes or no type thing. Accurate attendance records must be maintained, and we use Easy Reports, the Easy Report system, to do that. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but you must maintain at least 75% of your approved enrollment in year 2 and 85% of your approved enrollment in years 3 and 4. So what that means is that in your first year, you do not have to meet your full enrollment numbers to continue to get your full grant amount, because we know that in your first year, you may just be starting out, you may be trying to still build your enrollment of your students. But by the end of the second year, we expect you to be serving at least 75% of the students that you said you were going to serve. If you're not, then for the next year, we will reduce your funding to the number of students that you are actually serving in your program, okay? And then in years 3 and 4, we expect you to be serving at least 85% of the students that you said you would be serving in your program. Now, how do we determine what your enrollment is? We have decided to use the federal government's definition of regularly attending to help us with this enrollment minimum qualification number. So what we're saying is that if the number of regularly attending participants, the number of regularly attending participants is what we're going to be looking at to see if you are meeting your required numbers. So what does regularly attending mean? Regularly attending, according to the feds, a regularly attending participant is one that is who has attended at least 15% of the program hours that were offered. Okay, so it's going to vary from site to site depending on how many program hours or depending on how many hours that your program is going to operate. Okay, so for example, if your academic year program is going to run for a total of 300 hours, participants who participated in at least 45 hours during that school year will count towards your enrollment, towards your enrollment for your funding. Okay. Award amounts are also going to be based on the number of hours of operation. So let's say that you submit an application and say you're going to serve your students for a specific number of hours, but then when it comes down to it and you get into it, you realize that you were a little overzealous and you put way more hours than you can actually do at your school or at your sites. Maybe you can't find teachers to stay with a program, as late in the afternoon as you would hope they would, that sort of thing. So if you do reduce the number of hours of your operation, then in the next year, or it doesn't matter what year of the program you're in, if you reduce the number of hours of operation, then your fundings will be reduced accordingly for that next year of your program. Okay. Do note though, however, if you go above your attendance hours or operation hours that you said you were going to do in your original application, we cannot increase the amount of your grant award. Okay, because we give out this grant basically until the funds run out. And so we have no guarantee that there will be any additional funding to give you an increased amount if you increase your attendance. You're still allowed to do that if you would like to, if you can handle it with the funding that you have been awarded. We're not going to tell you can't do that, but just understand that if you take on additional students or additional program hours, we can't increase your funding in the next year to be higher than what was originally approved in your application. Excuse me, I get very thirsty during these. Okay. Continuation awards. We've talked about this before. Just understand that when you get your award, if you get your award, it's for each year of the grant. So you'll get that amount for 4 years, hopefully. You do have to do a non-competitive continuation application each year. And it has to be approved by the ALSDE each year in order for you to get that continued amount. And do understand that we have been highly encouraged by the feds to look at whether you're making progress towards your goals and objectives, whether you're submitting all your required reports and data and maintaining sufficient financial systems when we give you your continuation application each year. So if you are not meeting the requirements of the grant, if you're not in compliance with the grant, then we have been encouraged by the feds to not continue your funding for the next year of the grant. So please understand that if you don't meet your end of the bargain, then you can lose your funding. Okay. This is new this year. Funds that are not expended by the end of each fiscal year will not be allowed to be carried over to the next year. Okay. So all funds are supposed to be, or intended to be spent in the year that they were granted. And having amounts carry over each year and allow them to kind of snowball each year has just caused issues in the past. And so we are not going to continue to allow carryover in the future. Transportation allowance. So if in your grant, you say that you are going to provide transportation either to or from your program, either during the school year or the summer, you can apply for additional funds of $10,000 to help with the funding of that transportation. If you do say that you want that, just make sure that your proposed budget and your plan, your transportation plan in your application support the need of those additional funds. And then if you plan to serve students who attend schools that are considered rural, or REAP eligible. So REAP stands for Rural Education Achievement Program eligible. Another way you can tell is if they qualify for Title V funding, then they can apply for an additional $10,000 for transportation money. So that will give them a total of $20,000 for transportation if they're providing transportation to or from their program during the school year, or to and from the program during the summer if you're having a summer program. And do understand that this is addition to the maximum grant award. These transportation funds will be added to that maximum. So if you qualify for $350,000 and you qualify for $20,000 in transportation allowance, then your total grant would be $370,000. Okay. If you are a non-LEA applicant, then you should consult with your LEA partner to determine whether that school is REAP eligible and determine if you're eligible to apply for that additional $10,000 for rural schools. Eligible applicants, we talked about this before, pretty much anyone can apply for this grant, whether you are a private organization or a public organization. Here are some examples, but usually it's either school districts or LEAs. LEA stands for Local Education Agency, and that's what we tend to use here at the State Department. So if you hear me talking about LEAs, that's what I'm talking about, school districts. But then also community-based organizations tend to apply, and faith-based organizations can apply. Other organizations can also apply for this grant, such as municipalities, just other organizations in general, but we tend to have applications from LEAs and CBOs, and then sometimes an FBO. All applicants must demonstrate how they propose to target students who attend what comes down to being a Title I eligible school, okay? Here are the criteria listed for Title I eligible schools. Sometimes a school is actually eligible to receive Title I funding, but their school system chooses to not give them that funding. They choose to focus on other schools within their system. And so they may be eligible, but not actually a Title I school. But as long as they're eligible for those funding, for that funding, they can you can serve those students, and you can apply to help those students with a 21st century program. This is new wording, so I'm going to spend a minute on this. Previously or currently funded 21st century subgrantees are eligible to apply for new grant funding, but the applicant must demonstrate how the new award will supplement any existing programs and or provide additional sites. So this is not something that it's always been something that's been allowed from the feds, but I don't think we've actually allowed it here at the state. But well, we have partially, but part of it we haven't. So I think we've always allowed LEAs to have current grants to apply for new grants for new sites. But according to the feds, you can also apply for an additional grant if you for a site that currently has funding. However, again, they have to really demonstrate how that new award will supplement the existing program. So the only thing I could see this being acceptable for is that, let's say that you have a K-12 school, and in your original application, you only plan to serve students in grades K through 3, but now in that same school, now you want to add students for grades 4 through 8, then you could go ahead and apply for additional funding in this grant, okay? We've never allowed that before. I'm not exactly sure how that will look with it being 2 different grants within the same school. We'll have to look into that more deeply if anyone chooses to do that, but it is something that the feds say that you can do, and so we wanted to make sure that we offered that as a possibility. All right, competitive priorities are the same as they were in our last meeting, so I'm going to show this for a second. You can always go back and look at it later. This is priorities 3 through 5. Not going to go into these. And now we're going to go into the rules and regulations, which we kind of touched on in our previous meeting, but not as deeply as we are going to today. Please understand that your program has to have an academic focus, which I don't think has always been stressed in the past. So applicants must propose at least weekly academic instruction and enrichment in English language arts, reading, and mathematics. So English language arts and reading, that really should be a slash between the two. So you don't have to necessarily do both. So let me change that really quick. And mathematics. So every week you should have some sort of activities at all grade levels for ELA or reading or mathematics for your students to participate in. Program operation, I think we talked about this in our last meeting. I'll just touch on it really quickly. Your program has to run outside of the regular school day or during periods when school is not in session. The only exception to this is if you say that you're going to offer activities to target family members of the students participating in your programs. Those may actually take place during the school day because they're going to be attended by family members who have already graduated from school, hopefully, or who are no longer in school. So it is okay to have those programs during the school day. But other than that, anything that a school age participant would participate in has to be done after school hours. It has to be provided in a location that is preferably in a public school, because we know that those meet the requirements, or they should meet the requirements and regulations that are put forth by the state and by the federal government. But if they're not going to run in a public school, the location must be at least as available, safe, conducive to learning, and accessible as a public school. And just understand that if you plan to have if you are not a public school and you're applying and you plan to have your 21st Century Center location somewhere other than a public school, then we reserve the right to come and inspect that building before finalizing your awards, okay? You have to provide equitable services to the private schools that are in the area of the schools that you are serving. Again, you're serving students that attend certain schools. And so if there is a private school that is located in the attendance area of those schools, of those public schools, then you also have to offer services to that private school as well. So you must consult with your nonprofit elementary and secondary schools to see what their needs are when you're doing your needs assessment, and to see if they're interested in their students participating in your after-school program. And if they are, then you do have to provide them with equitable services as what you provide to your public school students. And so if you say you're going to provide transportation to your public school students, you would also need to provide transportation to those private school students. Now, you don't have to provide transportation outside of the school district. So let's say that you have a child that attends a school that's within the school district, but they live in another city, or it could even be a state outside of that school district. Then your obligation would just to be to transport that student to somewhere like a neutral area within that attendance area for them to be picked up by the parents or by the private school to take them beyond the school borders. So just wanted to put that out there as a requirement. Okay. I didn't want to go into these into great detail, but I do want to make you aware that if you are writing this grant, we highly recommend that you go to the Code of Federal Regulations website and review these federal regulations. So 2 CFR parts 25, 170, 175, 180, and 200 all are applicable to 21st century. And then 34 CFR parts 76, 77, 81, and 82 are also applicable. So just understand that if you get this grant, you have to agree that you are going to follow these federal regulations, that you will read them, be aware of them, and make sure you follow them as closely as you can. You do have to also review the certifications and assurances for federal subawards and the program-specific assurances form, which is one of the forms that you'll have to sign and submit as one of your required documents as part of your application. And that will have to be signed by if you're an LEA, your superintendent. If you're a CBO or FBO, it would need to be by either superintendent, chief financial officer, and then whoever the lead is of your organization, if you're a CBO, and then whoever your chief financial officer is for your organization would also have to sign that as well. Okay, so trying to make sure I haven't forgotten anything there. All right, federal requirements. These next things that I'm not initially going to read each one, but I want you to go back and read yourself. These are all federal requirements for us to have in the application, okay? So one of the things the feds checks when they audit us is to whether our applications had these requirements in it. So your application, when you turn it in, must include descriptions of all of these following bulleted items. Okay, so just going to touch on each one. The activities that you plan to fund with 21st Century funds, how those activities are expected to improve student achievement and student success, how the transportation needs of students will be addressed. So you have to have a transportation plan. Strategies to disseminate information about your 21st Century Center, including its location, to the community in a manner that's understandable and accessible. Federal, state, and local programs that will be combined or coordinated with your project to make most effective use of public resources without supplanting. This is just a continuation. Hold on. Okay, sorry. How the project activities will meet the measures of effectiveness. We're going to talk about those in a little bit. The partnership between or among the school or LEA and a community-based organization and or another public or private organization. Remember, these are descriptions of each of these things. An evaluation of the community needs and available resources for the Community Learning Center, and a description of how the project proposed to be carried out in the center will address those needs, the applicant's experience or promise of success, and how the applicant will use appropriately qualified persons, including senior citizens, to serve as volunteers in their program. All right, continuation of this. We're no longer in you have to provide a description of, but now you have to include a preliminary plan and assurances. Okay, so you have to include a preliminary plan for how the 21st Century program will continue after the funding ends. So remember, sustainability is a big part of the federal guidelines for 21st Century. These funds, you were really not intended to get this grant year after year after year, or grant after grant after grant. It's really supposed to be you get it for 3 to 5 years, and then during that time you build sustainability, and at the end of that 3 to 5 years, depending on your grant, you're able to take over that after school program with local and community funding outside of the 21st Century funds. That is the That is the goal of the federal 21st century program. Now we know that's easier said than done, but you do have to have a plan in place of what you will do if these funds go away. So make sure that there is a section where you do have to fill out information on that. Please give me just 1 second. I'm getting messages. Make sure this is not about today's thing. Okay. All right. Also, you have to show that the project will take place in a safe, easily accessible facility that's conducive to an effective learning environment. That you are adhering to local zoning and safety permit requirements. That your program was developed and will be carried out in active collaboration with the schools that the participating students attend. Because those schools have to share relevant data with you about those students. Let's see. And then you have to show that the activities are going to be in alignment with the challenging state and local academic standards. All right, you must also include, this is a continuation, sorry. You have to primarily target students who attend schools that are eligible for Title I community-wide programs. We've already talked about that, our school-wide programs. And that you have to show that the community has been timely notified of your intent to submit an application. So as soon as you're absolutely sure that you are going to submit an application, it is your responsibility to notify your community that the application is being submitted. And then you need to detail that in your application in the appropriate place. We'll talk about that in a little while. And then after submission, you have to make your application and any waiver request available for public review if that occurs. Okay, so if you get the grant or don't get the grant, you have to make your application available for public review if requested. All right, so those are the federal requirements. Now we're going to go into the state level guiding principles and program requirements. Most of these are the same as they were in the Cohort 26 grant, but they've been organized in a different way. So when you get the RFA, it's going to look slightly different. But basically, what we've done is just try to put all of the rules and regulations and musts, all the things that are requirements in one area of the RFA so that you're not having to search for things throughout the RFA. Because in last year's, the Cohort 26 RFA, some rules and regulations could be found like in the application instructions, while others were found in this area, the program requirements. And so we just realized that we wanted to try to make it as easy as possible for you to find the rules and regulations when you're looking for them. And we've organized them by these 12 guiding principles that are meant to serve as a foundation for programs as they strive to provide high quality out of school time experiences. Just understand that these guiding principles do have program requirements, but they are also intended to be flexible enough so that you can adapt them to your local situations. All right. So our first principle is needs, performance goals, and objectives. I'm not going to go into the details about the principle itself, but here are the program requirements that fall under this principle. Every applicant or subgrantee must conduct and document a comprehensive needs assessment to ensure alignment with the federal and state requirements. You have to identify the academic, attendance, behavioral, and family engagement needs of the students, the needs of the participating schools and their surrounding community, and the needs of the families of the program participants. So right now, I would highly suggest, as soon as you decide you're going to apply, this needs to be your first order of business, is conducting this needs assessment, creating surveys, going out and interviewing the community, interviewing parents at the schools that you plan to serve, and finding out what the needs are of those students, the school, the community, and those families, okay? The results of this needs assessment has to directly inform the design and implementation of your program. So you can't, if you do it the right way, you shouldn't be able to skip this part and just start planning your activities. Whatever activities you plan to do should be based off of the needs of your students, of the school, of the community, and of the students' families, okay? All 21st century projects must address the following performance goals in their program objectives. You can have additional performance goals if you would like to, but these are the ones that we've established from the ALSDE that are required, okay? So students regularly participating in the program will meet or exceed state and local academic achievement standards in ELA reading and math. Students regularly participating in the program will show improvement in school attendance and performance. Students regularly participating in the program will show improvement in behavior during the school day by having reduced disciplinary referrals. Students regularly participating in the program will demonstrate holistic health and wellness by exhibiting positive self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, decision-making skills, and self-management. Students regularly participating in the program will demonstrate civic responsibility and strengthen their community through service learning projects. And families of students regularly participating in the program will be afforded opportunities for increased parent and family engagement. Okay. Subgrantees are to develop SMART objectives based on those goals. And so SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, okay? These objectives should be realistic targets for the project written in an active voice using action verbs. So well-written objectives should answer the following question: who is going to do what, when, and to what extent? Okay. Some of those objectives are provided for you for the state. They are requirements, and then some you will have to develop as part of your program yourself, depending on the needs of your students. We'll get to that in a little bit. All right, diversity of programming is our second guiding principle. All activities provided with 21st century funds must be allowable under the program and consistent with 21st century requirements. They must be used to raise student achievement through the activities that take place during out-of-school time programming and are aligned with those challenging state and local academic standards. You must use the measures of effectiveness to govern your use of these funds. Okay, so let me go over what that is really quickly. This means that you must develop and implement programs and activities that are based upon an assessment of objective data regarding the need for before and after school or summer recess programs and activities in the schools and communities. They are based upon an established set of performance measures, aimed at ensuring the availability of high quality academic enrichment. They are based upon evidence-based research, and that those measures of student success align with the regular academic program of the school. So what you're doing in your out-of-school time program should align with the regular academic programming, but look different, okay? And they should meet the academic needs of participating students and include performance indicators and measures as described in Title IV of the ESEA. And then you have to collect the data necessary for the measurements of those student successes that are described above. So those are the measures of effectiveness. So here is a list of authorized activities. I've already gone over these in previous meetings, and so I'm not going to read through these, but you can come back and look at them in the recording. This is the first set. This is the continuation. All All right, I'm going to touch on pre-approved field trips. I think I've touched on this before, but I just want to make sure. Please understand that field trips have to be connected to an academic or enrichment program and provide an educational experience. Even if you have the best lesson plan imaginable, we can no longer approve field trips to venues that are usually a venue that is for entertainment purposes only, okay? The federal government, when they talked about taking away 21st century funding, this was one of the things that they talked about. And when they reinstalled it, this is one of the things they said they would be looking for. And I have already seen where other states are getting findings for this, approving field trips to venues such as amusement parks and things like that, even if they had a great lesson plan to go with it. We just can't risk that. And so we are no longer going to be approving field trips to anything other than an educational venue. So we have a list of approved venues that you're welcome to request and look at. It should be on our website, but if not, we'll make sure we get that on there. And we're not saying that those are the only things that you can go to. I'm sure new educational venues open up across the state or outside, like immediately outside of the state all of the time that we may not be aware of. If that's the case, just let us know, and we'll be happy to check those out. And if they meet those criteria of being an educational venue, then we'll add them to the list. But all field trips do have to be pre-approved by the ALSDE. And you have to submit those field trip request forms by August 15th for first semester trips and January 15th for second semester trips. You can only do one field trip in the first semester and one field trip during the second semester of the school year. But then for the summer, you can actually take up to one field trip per week. And those would have to be submitted by by May 15th for the summer. You cannot collect any kind of fees from students or families to offset field trip expenses. You can request donations from the community, especially to pay for things like food or meals during the field trips. But you can't require a parent or a child to pay a fee to attend the field trip or pay for their own meal or pay for their ticket, anything like that. Now you can say they have to buy their own souvenirs that are not required, but you can't, anything that's required to be a part of the field trip, you cannot charge the parents or the families for. Field trips must be allocable, reasonable, and necessary. And I've already talked about those limits. All right. Here is a few more authorized activities that we encourage, especially this career and job training CTE programs, especially if you're planning on doing a high school or middle school program. We highly recommend that you contact your local CTE staff for your LEA to see if you can work with them to come up with some great activities to incorporate CTE into your after school and summer programming. I think that is a great way to make sure that you get kids involved in your program. And then the rest of these are the same as they were in our last meeting. All right, unauthorized activities. I believe that these are the same. The only thing I do want to touch on is food. Purchase of food during the academic year, even if it's for snacks in the afternoon, is not allowable unless that food is part of an approved cooking class, a cooking demonstration, or a health nutrition lesson. Okay, this needs to be something that you do on a regular basis, not just like a one and done type thing. It's possible that you could have like a special presenter come in and present and then, provide food for that, for them to do like a cooking or nutritional demonstration. But typically these would need to be like a standard lesson, a standard activity you have with your program. Now, food. So for your afternoon snacks during the school year, you need to reach out to your Alabama State Child Nutrition Program to talk to them about providing those afternoon snacks for the students. They should be able to do that for you for free. So reach out to your CNP programs. If you're a CBO or an FBO, somebody other than an LEA, then you should be able to reach out to the LEA that you're going to partner with to reach out to their child nutrition program about providing those afternoon school snacks during the school year. But then during the summer, things are a little bit different. During summer programming, C&P programs are not required to operate, and so an LEA may not have a summer feeding program that is in their area, so they may need to be able to provide breakfast and lunch and a snack to students that can't or won't be funded through their C&P program. And so in that case, you may be able to use 21st century funds, but it has to be pre-approved with the ALSDE. There's a lot of guidelines and rules and regulations around that. This is kind of a new thing for us. We want to make sure we do it the right way. So just understand that if you plan to feed students outside of it being an approved cooking class, cooking demonstration, or health and nutrition lesson, during summer programming, then you have to have a pre-approved plan in place with the ALSDE. Another thing that it doesn't, I don't think it does say field trips. Okay, so another thing, I probably should highlight that. Let me go ahead and do that now. Field trips may also be allowed. We may be able to also allow you to use 21st century funds to pay for food for field trips, just depending on the situation. Again, that's probably going to apply to summer program because during the academic year, field trips can only occur outside of academic school hours. So they would only happen like in the afternoons after school. So they probably won't be a very long field trip unless you choose to do one on a Saturday. And we don't seem to have a lot of 21st century programs that do that. But if that is the case, then just let us know and we can consider allowing you to purchase meals for that field trip or during the field trip if they're needed. Again, we really do prefer for you to reach out to your community partners and see if they can provide those meals, if that is a possibility. But if that's not a possibility and you've tried everything and you need to provide food for these kids, then we can definitely consider allowing you to use 21st century funds for that. All right, these are the same as before. All right. Please notice you are not allowed to use 21st century funds to provide gift cards, gift certificates, or other monetary incentives for students. You can, this is kind of new, you can provide little tiny trinkets as incentives that are non-monetary. So like a little ribbon, award ribbon, or, maybe buying them purchasing a book for them that they can keep themselves if they've read a certain number of books during the program, something like that, something that is inexpensive and is not money-based. So no gift cards, nothing like that. Again, if you're uncertain about that, we highly advise you to reach out to the ALSDE and get approval before purchasing any kind of incentives. Okay. The continuation of those unauthorized activities, same as the last meeting, so we're not going to continue to go through that. Oh, I do want to touch on this really quick because I'm not sure if I touched on it before. Purchase of clothing for employees or students is not allowed except if you're buying t-shirts for safety purposes for a field trip. If that is the case, then you can buy t-shirts for both the students and the staff. I would suggest if you have parents that are volunteering to come on the trip that you do ask them to buy their own shirt, or that you might be able to buy like a few additional shirts in each size to let them borrow, but you really should not purchase a shirt for a parent to keep for a field trip. And then you don't have to, we used to say that you had to keep that t-shirt at the site and reuse it over and over throughout the school year, and the kids couldn't take it home. But we have now gotten permission from the feds to say that the kids can take that t-shirt home. But you should only buy one, and they should use it throughout the whole school year. And then again, I would just suggest that you buy some extras for the students as well, so that if they do for some reason tear up their shirt or lose it, you can allow them to borrow a shirt for future field trips. I wouldn't give them another free shirt, but you could let them borrow in that case, okay? Again, you can do that for the staff as well. And then an additional exception to this clothing rule is if you're planning on having an activity where a certain type of clothing is required for safety reasons, then you can buy like I would say a classroom set of that clothing for those students. So for example, if you are having a ballet class and for your students and they need toe shoes or they need leotards or something like that to allow for the safety or proper movement during those ballet activities, then you can buy that a set of those for your students for that class. Now, typically, the intention is for you to keep those items. Again, leotards, that may not be feasible because that could be a hygiene issue. But for things like shoes or things like that, that might be able to be used from year to year, if they're not worn out, we would suggest you keeping those in the program and allowing future kids to use them in the future. So again, all this has to be pre-approved by the ALSDE, but we'll work with you to come up with a good plan if these items are necessary in order for your program to take place and be safe. Okay. All right, our third guiding principle is academic enrichment. I've already mentioned this multiple times that you must operate in a manner that maximizes a positive impact on the student's academic performance. You have to provide, at minimum, weekly dedicated literacy and mathematics instruction and enrichment activities at all grade levels for after-school programs and daily for summer programs, okay? And these activities must be evidence-based as defined in Title 8, Part A of the ESEA and reauthorized by ESSA if you want to look up what that evidence-based means. Our fourth guiding principle is holistic health and wellness. Your program should intentionally embed opportunities for youth to develop holistic health and wellness, which is sustained by various pillars: physical, nutritional, emotional, social, intellectual, financial, and environmental. Okay, so you should be using your needs assessment to identify which pillars your holistic health and wellness activities are going to address. Okay, we're not asking that you address all of these for your students. You need to look at the needs of your students and determine which of these holistic health and wellness pillars need to be addressed in the activities that you provide. Okay, but we do ask that you provide, at minimum, weekly holistic health and wellness instruction. This could look however you need it to, as long as it falls in one of those pillars. So it could be physical activities, nutritional activities, social, intellectual, financial, environmental activities. Here's some things down here. Your goals, objectives, and activities should emphasize youth development, nutritional health education, drug and violence prevention programs, counseling programs, arts, music, physical fitness, and or mental wellness programs. So any of these would qualify as being a holistic health and wellness activity. Again, what are the needs of your students? That should determine what those activities are going to be. Our fifth guiding principle is service learning, voice, choice, and leadership. All programs are required to provide at least one service learning project per semester. And then if you do a summer program, one for the summer program. And students should serve an integral role in investigating the community's needs, developing a strategy for change, implementing the service activity, reflecting on the effect of the project, and sharing what they've done and learned. Those are kind of all the steps of a service learning project. Now, we do ask you to tell us what your service learning projects are going to be for your first year, but please understand that one of the key aspects of service learning projects is supposed to be that students help determine what those service learning projects are. And so you can have a plan, you can tell us what your plan is, but if you need to adjust that plan once you're actually in the thick of it and your students want to do something slightly different, then we won't have a problem with that. You just need to let us know. If you want to kind of adjust that service learning project a little bit to make it where it's more inclusive of the students' ideas and what they have said they feel like the needs of the community are. Okay, but then in future years after the first year, they should have a big voice in what you're going to do next semester for your service learning project. They should help determine what the community needs are, what you guys are going to do, that sort of thing. So we can provide more information about proper way. There's all kinds of information on the internet about service learning projects and how to do that. And we highly recommend you check those out, but we can also kind of provide some for you if you need us to. All right, family engagement is our sixth guiding principle. You do have to provide an orientation as well as at least 2 family engagement activities each academic year as part of your program. And we encourage you to design and implement activities that address the educational needs of family members of your participating students. They should promote family literacy, enhance parental engagement, and provide opportunities for skill development that empowers families to support their children's academic success. So it could be something like you offer a GED prep class for family members, or maybe if you have a high population of English learning families, then maybe you could provide some literacy activities with parents of the participating students. Just understand that if you provide these classes and activities, they do have to be family members of the participating students, not just anyone from the community. So you can't just like do an open GED class for the entire community and let anyone come to it. It would have to be family members of the students that you're serving. All right, our 7th guiding principle is leadership and staff. This first set of requirements are just general requirements for all staff members, 21st century staff members. All staff must complete personnel activity reports or PARs, documenting the time worked and what was done during that time, and may be asked to submit those PARs at any time during the grant. They definitely will be asked to submit those during compliance monitoring, but could be asked to submit them during other times as well. Time spent working on the 21st century program must be separate from when an employee is paid to perform other duties and may not exceed 8 hours a day. So, for example, if you have a contracted teacher that is going to be serving as a teacher in your 21st century program, and their contract doesn't end until 3:15 in the afternoon for their regular teaching duties, then you cannot start paying them for 21st century until after 3:15 in the afternoon. So you need to have other staff in place to do something with those students in the time period between when school gets out and when your 21st and when your academic teachers can start helping and providing academic activities. There might need to be some non-academic teaching staff to provide activities for the students during that interim time, or to at least keep an eye on them until your program starts, just depending on your situation. You have to have a favorable fingerprinted criminal background check for all 21st century staff, all vendors, and all volunteers who will work directly with students before they're allowed to work for the project. Okay. So just make sure, and again, so for your staff, if it's needed, they need a fingerprinted background check, you can use 21st century funds to pay for that fingerprinted background check. For vendors, they should have to pay for their own fingerprinted background check, and that also does need to be done through the Alabama teaching program. I'm drawing a blank on exactly what it's called. So sorry, that popped out on mine. It'll come to me in a minute, or somebody will comment. One of my staff will comment and remind me. We do have requirements for this. So if you need more requirements about the fingerprinted background check, then just let us know. We can send you more information, and we'll probably go over it in one of the upcoming office hours. A job, yeah, field print aim. Yes, there's another name that I'm trying to think of. It's through teacher certification through the State Department. I'm just having a hard time thinking of the exact name of the department. how, but you can go online into Alabama Chiefs and look up to see if a teacher is certified and whether they've had an appropriate background check. That is the system you have to use to get those background checks done for any staff and vendors, anybody who's paid with 21st Century Funds, and then volunteers who work directly with students on a regular basis would need to go through like their local sheriff's department or DHR to get that background check done. Okay. And then you have to create a job description for each 21st Century staff position and upload it into eGap as part of your application. So you have to submit those along with your related documents. And each job description must include a job title and summary, reporting structure, so who that position reports to, required knowledge, skills, abilities, and qualifications, and essential duties and responsibilities of that person or of that staff position. All right. Here's our requirements for administrative staff specifically, okay? Administrative and indirect costs together, first of all, may not exceed 30% of the grant award. We have people all the time that want us to increase this, but please understand, I haven't seen another state who has a administrative cost as high as ours is. Most states do not allow their subgrantees to go over 10% administrative costs. So please understand that this is actually a very generous percentage for your grant award. Okay. And it does, again, have to include your indirect costs as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. You have to identify at least one administrative staff member that's going to be responsible for collecting and maintaining PowerSchool data, easy reports data, data sharing agreements, attendance and assessment data for your program. And there must also be a designated administrative staff member responsible for bookkeeping and upload, like doing your financial reports, uploading your expenditure reports, and that sort of thing into eGap. Now, these duties can be assumed by the program director or site coordinator if you choose that, or you can create additional administrative positions to assume those responsibilities. So you could have a position such as a data entry coordinator or a bookkeeper or a CFO or CSFO that will take care of those bookkeeping or data collection responsibilities. You must have a program director. You have to have one program director that's basically in charge of the entire program. This should be the leader of your program. You should not have a program director that oversees the programs, but there's really somebody else, like a bookkeeper, who's actually over that program director. That's not the way it should work. Your program director should be the top of the line position over your subgrantee's 21st Century Program Director. They have to be in place before training begins. If you get the grant, we hope that training will begin in July. So you need to already have kind of someone, if you think you're going to get the grant, you need to kind of already have someone in place of who you want your program director to be. And you should understand that this is a part-time position unless that program director manages 5 or more grants. Now, notice I said grants and not sites. Sometimes we have a grant, one grant that actually has more than one site underneath it. I really don't like it when applicants do that because I feel like it stretches your funds really thin, and that's when we tend to have issues with people wanting to go over the 30% administrative minimum or maximum. But when you're looking at this, when you're looking at what you should pay your program director, it should be based off of the number of grants that you have, okay? You can pay your program director either at an hourly rate or a contracted salary. Some LEAs choose to do that. We don't tell you what you have to pay your program directors, but several current subgrantees have asked us to include just kind of a typical range of what we typically see across the state, of what other sites pay these positions. And so I've included that. Typical hourly rates for program directors usually ranges somewhere between $40 and $55 an hour. But again, it is as long as it's reasonable, it's at your discretion as the subgrantee to choose what those rates are going to be. Now, if you choose to pay your program director as a contracted salary position, then you have to create an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, with that program director, and it should clearly outline the terms of their service, including the expected number of hours they're supposed to work and their monthly compensation. And that compensation should be, we should be able to look at that compensation and kind of determine what their hourly rate would be based on the number of hours you're saying they will serve, and determine if it's reasonable or not. Okay. Best practice. Again, we're not going to tell you what you have to do, because we know that different sites have different special circumstances. But best practice when determining the salary of your program director is to apply your organization's established pay scale to calculate what that person's full-time salary would be if they were full-time, and then allocate approximately 20% of that full-time salary to each site's grant for up to 5 grants. Okay, so give you an example. If your program director is over 3 grants, then, and you say that whatever their position is, their full-time salary would be around $80,000, then you would take $80,000, and 60% of $80,000 would be the actual salary for that program director, and 20% would actually be allocated to each site. So 20% would come out of each grant or site's budget. Okay, that's best practice. If you say that if you want to go around this, if you don't want to stick with this best practice, what we're saying the best practice is, then just understand that you may have to justify your reason when it comes time for your budget to be passed. You may have to justify your reasoning for not going with this what we've kind of determined is our best practice. You might need to justify the reason why you're wanting to pay them more or less or whatever. Okay. If this is new, if the subgrantee has more than 5 grants, and if funding permits, an assistant program director may be appointed to assist the program director in the oversight of the additional grants. Okay. And you can do that however you choose to. So the grants could be divided equally between the program director and the assistant program director. But again, those best practices in establishing their salary should still apply. So let's say that you get a grant for 6, you get 6 grants. Let's say you apply for 8 and 6 of them actually get the grant, okay, under your LEA or subgrantee. And you want to hire a assistant program director to help with that 6th site. You could either hire them just to help with that 6th site. You could have your program director that's paid a full-time salary for the 5 sites that they are over. And then you have an assistant program director that's just over the 1 additional site and only gets paid 20% of what a full-time salary would be. Or you could divide them equally and say the regular program director is going to serve 3 sites, the assistant program director is going to serve 3 sites, and you're each going to get 60% of a full-time salary. Okay. You can determine how you want to do that at your site, but either way would be allowable. Just understand, I would suggest that your main program director make a little bit more than your assistant program director, just because your main program director is still going to be the primary contact for ALSDE for your subgrant, for your like entire organization. And they will ultimately still be responsible for ensuring that all required reports, data submissions, processes, compliance requirements, all of the things that we look for when we determine if a grant is in compliance will still be the responsibility of that main program director. So even if they have somebody that, even if you've split the sites among two different, like a program director and an assistant, you still need to have one person who's in charge, who makes those final decisions and who is ultimately responsible for the grant being, or for the subgrantee being in compliance. And that would be the main program director. Okay. All right. Site coordinator. Each site or center has to have a site coordinator. And they cannot be shared between centers or sites. So if you have a grant and you've done what I really wish we would not allow it, but some people still really want to do it this way. But if you have one grant that serves two different sites, then you have to appoint a site coordinator for each of those sites. And I think of a site coordinator kind of like the principal of a school, okay? They are in charge of, they're the boots on the ground person who's in charge of that 21st century program when it's going on. And they're the leader of that program at that time, but they do report to the program director, who would be their boss, right? Or the person that they report to. So again, this should be a part-time hourly position. Most of that person's hours should be scheduled during the program's operating hours, because they're the person who's making sure that the students are safe, that there's no active intruders, there's, nothing, that teachers are doing what they're supposed to be doing, that sort of thing. They're like the principal when the program is going on. So most of their hours should be worked during the program's operating hours. But they can charge the grant for up to 1 additional hour per day for planning. And then this is new. You can charge the grant for up to 20 additional hours for pre-opening planning, so before school starts, and 20 additional hours for end of year closeout if needed. Okay, so one of the things I do when I look at a budget when it comes in is I look at what your operating hours are and what you said you're going to pay your site coordinators and your administrative staff, all of your administrative staff, and determine if they coordinate with the hours that you say your program is going to be open, and allowing you to add these additional hours hopefully will help with that. That you can add these additional planning hours before your program starts and after your program ends, if you choose to do so and if your budget permits you to do so. Typical salaries that we see range somewhere between $35 and $45 an hour for site coordinators. Just depends on the site. And if the subgrantee oversees only one grant, then the program director may assume the responsibilities of both the program director and site coordinator within a single position. But you can't pay one person two different salaries because they're doing both jobs. Okay. We've seen that try to come through. So you don't have to have, if you just have one site for your whole subgrantee, for your whole organization, you don't have to have both a program director and a site coordinator. That person can serve, you can have one person that serves both of those capacities, but it does need to be one position and one salary for that position, that goes by, those typical guidelines for best practices, for their salary. Okay, now let's talk non-administrative staff. I need to kind of hurry up. For non-administrative staff, again, hours worked should be primarily during the program's operating hours, but they can work up to 1 additional hour per day for planning. That could be before or after the program, but no more than an hour additional. And just letting you know, it's always a red flag to me when you say that everybody is working an hour more each day. I just find that hard to believe. So please be mindful of that. If additional work hours are needed outside of that additional hour per day, then the program director or site coordinator must request approval from the ALSDE using the 21st century verification and planning form before those hours are worked. So for example, if you need some non-administrative staff to come in like the week before school starts to help set up and help get your room ready and things like that, then you would need to fill out this 21st century verification of planning form to ask for them to get those additional hours to come and help with the setup of your program. Your academic teachers. So during academic instruction, a student to teacher ratio of 12:1 or less is encouraged. But however, it says or less, but you also don't need to have a certified teacher for like every 5 kids. It should be maintained around that 12:1 area, okay? Certified instructors are encouraged to ensure instruction that correlates with the Alabama academic standards, but we do understand that sometimes you cannot find certified instructors that are willing to work after school or during the summer. So you can employ non-certified academic teachers. However, it can't be anyone. They have to be knowledgeable of the standards, and they have to be either retired or former educators. They could be 3rd or 4th year college students who are majoring in education or majoring in that subject that you plan for them to teach in. Or they could be an individual who has a bachelor's degree in the subject that they'll be teaching, okay? But it can't just be they've got a GED and they're going to teach science, okay? Because, you know, I worked with AMSTI before, the Alabama Math, Science, and Technology Initiative before coming to federal programs, and I have seen several instances where if a teacher does not know the material, they can actually create more damage than benefit. They can actually cause misconceptions in students' learning that is very difficult to fix. And so we want to make sure that if we are doing academic instruction, that we have appropriate people who have the required skills necessary to provide that academic instruction, so that we are not actually causing damage to the students' learning instead of increasing their academic achievement. Okay, so please be mindful of that. All right. Academic teachers are also a part-time hourly position, and the typical hourly rate we see for them is somewhere between $30 and $40 an hour. A lot of times when we see amounts that are way less than this, those are the same organizations that say they can't find certified teachers to work. Well, a lot of times a certified teacher is not going to work. They've already been working all day. They don't want to work an extended day without being compensated fairly. And so they're going to want that higher pay. Okay. And I think it goes, I don't know that this presentation goes into this, but it does go into it in the RFA, that it talks about, like, for summer programming, if you're hiring academic teachers, you can provide them with an hourly pay that is based off of what other certified teachers are being paid for similar after school time programs. So for example, if you know that the ARI reading camps are paying their teachers $65 an hour, then you can also pay your certified teachers $65 an hour, so that you're competitive with that. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a possibility for you if your budget allows you to do that. Other non-administrative staff may be hired and could include things like lead teachers, enrichment teachers, teacher assistants, student assistants, nurses, etc. Just remember, if you plan to hire any of these staff, you do have to provide us with a job description and upload that into the EGAP application when you submit it. All right, I'm gonna try to go faster. Professional development requirements. Total PD costs may not exceed 10% of the grant award. All staff must participate in at least 10 hours of professional development each year. That could be virtual, it could be going to conferences, it could be, you know, your back to school meetings with them, staff meeting, things like that, where you're providing them with professional development. They just all have, no matter what the position is, have to participate in at least 10 hours each year. All program directors and site coordinators must attend the new Cohort 27 virtual trainings and should attend or later watch all other virtual trainings and office hour meetings that have been scheduled throughout the year, as long as they're part of the program. So sometimes the ALSDE will schedule a meeting or an office hour meeting, and Unless we say it's mandatory, you don't have to come, but we highly recommend that you watch the meeting when you do have time to do so, the recording, so that you will not miss the important information that was gone over as part of that meeting. I see a question that just popped up. Are principals allowed to serve as site coordinators? Yes, they are. They are. Just keep in mind the principal's contracted hours during the school day. It has to be outside of those hours. So you'd have to figure out how that would work. Because I know that principals kind of, it depends on, I don't think it, I don't know this for sure, but I think it depends on whether you're elementary principal or high school or secondary principal. But I know some principals have requirements to participate in after school programming as part of their principal job. And so you would have to delineate how you're going to determine the difference between that work and their 21st century work. Okay. All program directors and site coordinators must attend one full day of training at the mega conference, which occurs in Mobile each year. But you're encouraged to attend the entire conference annually. We just have one day of full training on the Thursday of the mega conference each year that is specifically for 21st century program directors and site coordinators. Please keep in mind, we do expect you to have all program directors hired if you get the grant. We understand that site coordinators may be a little bit more difficult, and if you don't have someone in place when we have the mega meeting, then this year what we did was we had another additional in-person meeting that they had to come to, but we would prefer for them to come to the mega meeting if possible. So as soon as you know you've got the grant, please go ahead and try to start hiring program directors and site coordinators for the grant. If we let you guys know in late April or early May, hopefully you'll have time to get that in place before those trainings take place. But everybody, even if you don't have someone in place, we record all the trainings. We don't record the in-person trainings, so we schedule like a makeup in-person training, but we do expect everybody to participate in those trainings because otherwise they're just kind of running their program blind, and that could be dangerous. So they have to participate in those trainings. Program directors and at least two non-administrative staff must attend the ACEA conference annually. Because the ACEA conference is really from this year forward they're going to try to gear it more towards best practices and after school programming and community programming. So we need attendance for that conference to be mainly your people who work with your students, your staff that works directly with your students, so your teaching staff or your teaching assistants and things like that. So at least two of those non-administrative staff must attend, but you can have everybody attend if your budget permits it, okay? All non-administrative staff are encouraged to attend. And if that's the case, if your budget permits it and you do want to do that, then your program may close during the conference. If staffing levels are insufficient to operate your program due to your staff attending the ACA conference, but you just have to provide your parents with advance notice. Like as soon as you know that you're going to close the program, you need to start letting those parents know immediately, both in writing. You need to post, send it out in email, send it out on Facebook, post it on the wall at parent pickup. Make sure they have plenty of advance notice so that they can come up with somewhere else for their children to go in the afternoon. Okay. Answer other questions as when we get to the end. All right, sub-grantees may use funds for up to 2 staff members to attend an out-of-state conference also about out-of-school programming. Okay. And if you have the funds, if you've met all these other requirements and you have the funds for additional people to attend an out-of-state conference, we may allow that. You just need to ask. You just need to get pre-approval for that. All right, partnership with a school, LEA district superintendent and the principal of each participating school must sign an MOU that includes all roles and responsibilities associated with the partnership. And they must also sign the superintendent and principal support certification form to demonstrate their commitment and buy-in into the ongoing success of the program, okay? Principals also, this is new, principals also must agree to attend a virtual 21st 21st Century Principal meeting that will occur at the beginning of each year of the program. So this will be an annual meeting. We'll try to have it either right before school starts or right after school starts, but they have to agree to attend this meeting so that we can kind of inform them about what 21st Century is and try to get them to support you guys as much as possible in your programs. And then the collaboration of the day program and the after school program. So that's kind of what the intention of that meeting will be. All programs also must identify at least one staff member for each target school site to serve as the collaboration liaison with that school. It could be a teacher, it could be a administrative position. Don't really care who it is, as long as you have someone for each school, and their job will be, and this includes for private schools if you're serving those as well, their job would be to ensure active collaboration in program planning, implementation, and data sharing. Okay. All right. Next principle is community collaboration. All collaborative partners must be knowledgeable of the contents of the application. The application should be written in collaboration with all partners. And applicants are required to include all partners throughout the project planning, grant writing, startup, and implementation process. So in other words, if you're submitting your application and you have a collaborative partner in your application, it should be obvious that that partner has helped with every aspect of planning and writing your grant, and that they will be helping with the implementation of the program as well. Okay, you can't just say someone is your partner just so you can get those priority points, and then that partner really doesn't do anything. They really need to have very active participation in the program. Projects must also establish an advisory council that is comprised of students, teachers, parents, and members of the community. And that council must meet twice a year or once every 6 months. And appropriate documentation of those meetings should be maintained, such as sign-in sheets, agendas, and minutes. These are things that we ask for when we do your compliance monitoring. All right, program environment and operations. You should have a method established for enrolling students. And part of that should be your ongoing participation requirements for those students. So if you have rules and regulations about their participation, that needs to be included in their enrollment documentation. You should have behavior rules that are established and included in the student handbook. You cannot require students to attend an out-of-school time program. So you can't say that all kids that are failing a certain subject have to attend out-of-school program. That can't be a requirement. And facility requirements. If you're in a local school building, you should follow your school's comprehensive school safety plan, but you can differ it a little bit for the out-of-school time programming. If in a location other than a public school building, again, it must be as available, safe, conducive to learning, and as accessible as a public school. You have to adhere to local zoning and safety permit requirements, and you must be licensed through DHR, the Department of Human Resources, unless you're a faith-based organization. They do not have to meet that DHR requirement, licensing requirement. Costs associated with rent, utilities, and maintenance cannot be directly charged to a grant, and they must be part of your indirect costs. Okay, so if you choose to do your program in a building that's outside of a public school, then you cannot charge the grant for rent for that building and things like that. That would have to be part of your indirect costs. And LEAs should use their approved indirect cost rate, and non-LEAs. Now, some non-LEAs may have an approved indirect cost rate from the government. If they do, that's what they would use. But if they do not, then they can use the indirect cost rate, the restricted indirect cost rate of 8% for their indirect costs. Okay. 21st century community learners must operate in safe, secure, and accessible environment. You have to have comprehensive safety measures and have written plans to address fire and severe weather drills, emergency intruder and crisis management, illness and injury protocols, and transportation safety procedures. The application does ask you to kind of give a brief summary of each of these. And programs must also ensure compliance with Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA requirements and maintain documented plans for medication administration, disaster preparedness, and student health. All right, transportation. The use of vans to transport students is strictly prohibited unless you have prior approval by the ALSDE or the LEA has been obtained. This approval would signify that that vehicle has passed the ALSDE public transportation section's inspection process. So basically, if you're a CBO or FBO, then we highly recommend that you reach out to the school system that you'll be working with and partnering with for them to provide transportation using their local school buses because they've already met that inspection process. And then please note that the ALSDE abides by the guidelines set forth by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration regarding transport of children under the age of 5. There's specific rules and regulations about car seats that for students or children under the age of 5. And so transportation for preschool students may be more difficult. So you would need to reach out to this website, the NHTSA website, to look at what the guidelines are for that. All right, hours of operation. This is kind of new this year. 21st century, last year we just said 300 hours was the minimum that you had to operate, but after looking at other states and what they do, we made a little bit of adjustment to this. 21st century sites that serve elementary grades K through 5 are to be open for a minimum of 10 contact hours per week, Monday through Friday, for a minimum total of 360 hours over the course of that 36-week academic year. Okay, so any elementary program has to be open Monday through Friday, at least 10 hours a week. So usually that would break down to 2 hours per day. And so they would serve their students for the academic year is 36 weeks. So that would be 360 hours is their minimum program requirements, okay, for the school year. 21st century sites that serve middle or high school, we understand that those need to be a little bit more flexible. So in looking at what other states do, this kind of seemed to be the theme or the standard. So grades 6 through 12 should be open for a minimum of 6 contact hours per week, at least 4 days a week, for a total minimum of 216 hours over the course of a 36-week academic year. So last year, if you applied for a grant that was less than 300 hours, you didn't get it. This year, if you're serving middle or high school, you only have to have a program that serves students for 216 hours. But of course, you can go above and beyond that. You can have way more than that, but that's just the minimum that's required for middle and high school. Okay, and then again, it's 6 hours per week, at least 4 days a week, but you can vary that from day to day. And for middle and high school, so like one day it could be an hour-long program, while another day it's a 2-hour-long program, depending on the needs of your students and like their football practice schedules and things like that. During certain times of the year, you have different requirements. So that's a great question. What if you're a K-12 school and serve a mixture? Then the same rules would apply. So we'll have to talk about that, but you would have to your hours for your elementary students should meet the minimum of what's said here, and then your hours for your middle and high school should meet the other minimum. As far as the application itself, we'll have to determine, well, more than likely, you would just go with your elementary hours. I don't know. Well, that's a great question, and let me think about that one a little bit more carefully as to determine how you need to do your application for that in that case. Because that's a great point, and I have not thought about that because we did it differently last year. Okay, so I'm writing that down. Hours. Okay, we'll address that in the next meeting. All right. Your days of operation should be consistent from week to week. especially at the elementary level. We understand that in high school or middle school, it may change depending on the time of the year, like whether certain sports are in and things like that. But as much as you can, they should be consistent, especially definitely for the elementary school students. A project may choose to operate before school for a maximum of 30 minutes per day. However, those before school hours must be in addition to the required hours for after school. So if you want to serve kids before school, that would have to be addition to the 360 required hours after school for elementary, or for the 216 hours for middle and high. Saturday activities are also optional, but again, they cannot take the place of the hours that are required for after school programming. And you can have Saturday academies, and they, again, would need to be supplementary activities to after-school programming. Okay, for summer programming, here's those requirements for summer programs. The activities and services should be consistent with the academic and enrichment goals identified in the application. You have to operate a minimum of 75 hours during the summer. And programs should be designed for evidence-based learning, engagement, and small group implementation. And subgrantees are encouraged to collaborate and braid funds with other federal, state, or local programs that provide out-of-school time funding for summer programs. So we encourage you to work with like your ARI reading camps or the math camps for OMI. We encourage you to work with them to braid funds to create like a really robust summer program. And we can kind of help you with that if you need us to. All right, I've got to go faster. Number 11, program evaluation, monitoring, and improvement. I'm just going to kind of touch on these. You do have to hire an external evaluator. That person should be independent of your program and free from any conflict of interest. They must be hired before your program actually starts and adhere to the following guidelines. You do have to create a contract for them, a formal contract, not an MOU, but a contract. And that contract should say that they have to attend at least 2 virtual trainings per year, have appropriate skills and experience, conduct a minimum of 2 site visits per year, and provide written feedback after each of those visits. They should help the program director develop a logic model and/or evaluation plan and complete an evaluability checklist. They should collect and analyze student level and survey data. They should write a formal, comprehensive, and end-of-year evaluation. And you cannot pay an external evaluator more than $6,000 per year or 3% of the grant award, whichever is less. So in past grants, it's been 3%, but now that we are going over the amount that we used to go over, we saw some really large amounts being paid out this year, so we decided to cap that amount at $6,000. And please note, an external evaluator may not help you write or develop any part of your application for this cohort grant competition. Oh, I think I have the same slide twice. Sorry. Okay. Subgrantees must use Easy Reports to submit data for the evaluation purposes. So that is $900 per year, and you should make sure you put that in your budget. You do have to flag all students in PowerSchool. So if you are not an LEA, then you need to work with your local LEA and have an agreement in place to make sure that they know that they have to flag all students in PowerSchool, and they have to agree to that. These are the Government Performance and Results Act data that has to be reported to the feds. I'm not going to read these because we're running out of time, but you can go back and look at those later. You will be required to complete a self-risk assessment each year to determine your risk level, which is low, medium, or high. And then during the 4-year grant period, you will have to participate in compliance monitoring at least one time, and that monitoring will be risk-based. So for those that are considered low level or low risk, they have less things they have to submit than those who are considered medium or high risk. All right, financial management. You have to maintain direct oversight of your grant. You cannot sub-award other people to run your program for you. You have to serve as the fiscal agent, or the primary applicant must be the fiscal agent. Of course, you have to use expenses for allowable expenditures. They have to be applicable with state and federal laws. And you have to use the 2 CFR Part 200 cost principles. So we advise you to look those over. Your grant must supplement, not supplant, existing services and may not use to supplant other federal, state, and local or non-federal funds. So in other words, if you already have an out-of-school time program in place, then your 21st century funds would have to supplement that program you already have in place. You would not be able to use those funds for something else and all of a sudden start using 21st century funds to pay for something that you're already doing. That would be considered supplanting. So you have to use your 21st century funds for supplemental services to what you're already doing, unless those funds are no longer available. So for example, we used to provide ESSER funds for after-school programming, and then the ESSER funds went away. And so if you used 21st century to do your after-school programming the next year, you did not violate the supplement, not supplant requirement. Okay, contracts. We have a template. I'm not going to go deeply into this, but there is a template that we will provide for you for contracts that you need to use that has all of the required provisions, the federal provisions, because these are federal funds. There's specific federal provisions that have to be in all contracts. And so we encourage you to use our template that we provide to you. Please understand that if you're an LEA, in the past we've said, well, you can just use your LEA's contract. Well, your LEA's contract may not have those federal provisions because that may not be spending federal funds. And so you need to use the template we provide to you. It has to, at minimum, have a detailed scope of services, the duration of the contract, the method and amount of payment, including rates, total hours of service, and the total amount that's going to be paid to a vendor. And the contract has to be signed by both parties. Okay, so you use a contract when you're paying a vendor outside of your organization for any kind of service, okay? And if you're paying them for, or objects, but if you're paying them for purchase services, like they're going to come in and teach students an activity, then we do ask for you to upload that contract for us to review and approve before that activity takes place. We want to make sure that you're paying that person a reasonable amount for the service, and that you're not paying them more than what the federal government would be considered reasonable. So they say you should look at the fair market value for that position and what they make, and that's around the amount that you should be paying them. So not paying someone $300 or $1,000 for one day to come in and do like an hour-long activity. That's just not reasonable. Okay. MOUs should be used for a subgrantee to pay for services within its own organization. So let's say that you're an LEA 21st century program and you're going to pay your LEA transportation department to provide transportation for your students to go home after school, then you would do an MOU. There is an exchange of funds, but it's within your own organization. So an MOU is what would be appropriate. Again, we have a template for this, and that is what you should use. You also would do an MOU if you are having a formal agreement with a partner where there's no money being exchanged, but you just want to have a formal agreement on what the expectations of each partner is. That's another reason why you would do an MOU. Again, there's certain specific federal requirements and provisions that have to go into an MOU, so we advise you to use the template that we provide to you. Okay, I want to get to the actual application. I'm so sorry, I'm going to go over. Your ES2s have to be submitted monthly, or we ask that they be submitted monthly, but they have to be submitted at least quarterly. So the RFA does outline certain dates that ES2s must be submitted by, or you'll be considered as being non-compliant, but we prefer for you to submit them monthly. The federal government has really is really looking at this and looking at states who are not keeping up with their subgrantees expenditures. appropriately. And so this is something that we really will try to make sure occurs. And then you do have to have a comprehensive sustainability plan, and you can read more about that here. Please understand, okay, so let's go over the peer review process really quick. So subgrant applications that are received in EGAP by the deadline will be subject to a rigorous peer review process. In phase 1, we just check to make sure that all required materials, including your forms and appendices, have been uploaded into EGAP, and they have to be, they all have to be uploaded and signed in order for that application to be eligible for review. So if any forms or documents are not uploaded or the application has not been completed, it will automatically be disqualified. Then in phase 2, we have our ALSDE specialists go through the application to conduct an initial review for completeness. So not only have the documents been uploaded, but they've all been signed by the appropriate people. They have all the required signatures and dates. The applicant is actually eligible to be a 21st century program. They are going to serve Title I schools, and just to make sure that you are in compliance with the instructions in the RFA. Okay. In phase 3, that's when we go through the federal compliance review and scoring. So during this phase, any application that has met those first 2 phases will go into phase 3. And this is when we have 3 neutral peer reviewers review and score each application. An application can earn up to a maximum of 120 points. Applications that fail to earn an average score of at least 70 or higher will not be eligible for funding. The competitive priority points will only be added to applications that are eligible for funding. So you have to at least have a score of 70 or higher before your competitive priority points can be added. And then we go into phase 4, and that's where we take all eligible applications and rank them by their final scores, and then we will award the grants according to that rank until all the funds that are available have been allocated. And then in phase 5, we notify the applicants who received a subgrant award. Please understand, though, that if we will review, as part of our review of ALSD, we will review historical data to confirm compliance and performance during previous years or programs if you've had this grant before. And we do reserve the right to not grant an award if that data review reveals that you did not adhere to subgrant guidelines or meet project goals and objectives. So in other words, if we had continuous problems with you in the past with staying in compliance, submitting reports on time, doing your continuation application within the required deadlines, things like that, then we reserve the right to disqualify you from applying for this grant. Continuation awards are contingent upon you meeting all of those requirements again. So when it's time to give you your grant each new year, if in the previous year you stayed out of compliance the whole year and we had continuous issues with you staying in compliance, then we reserve the right to not continue to award you the grant in future years. All right, now we're getting into the application itself. I'm so sorry this is taking so long. We're going to go through this quickly. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but each section, I'm going to show you the questions that are going to be asked in each section of the application. Okay, so you will submit your application in EGAP. We hope that it will open on January 19th. Organizations do need to be an established entity in EGAP. There are instructions in the RFA that goes over how you verify whether your organization is an entity in EGAP and whether you're a user for that organization. We'll probably talk about that in one of the upcoming office hours so that you can go ahead and check on that. We just don't have time to do that today. But the application is divided into two main sections. You have supplemental information, and under that, you have your assurances, which is basically you just read those. And basically, it just says in the bottom of that by submitting your application, you're assuring that you will meet all those federal requirements and guidelines that we went over earlier. And then there's a section for you to submit the subgrantee contact information. This is contact information for the entire organization, so the LEA or the CBO that is applying. And then the second section is labeled 21st Century Cohort 17, and it's divided into 3 subparts. So you've got the budget, the application details, and the related documents. The application details is where most of these questions that we're about to go over will be located, and where you will answer those questions, okay? So let's start going over those. Again, this is going to be recorded, and so I'm not going to like go into detail about each one because you can go back and watch the recording and see what the exact questions are. So component 1 is general information. It's just going to ask you basic information about your program, grade levels, the name of your site, total program hours. This is where you'll actually do your calculation and determine how much funding you're eligible for, that sort of thing, okay? Component 2 is the needs statement, and these are the exact questions that will be in the needs statement section. Again, if you're watching this as a recording, you can pause it. All right, here's the rest of the needs statement questions. So when our peer reviewers are checking, they're going to be looking to see that you touched on each of these points under each question, okay? Component 3 is project design. Your project design includes your performance goals and objectives, description of your services and activities, and your evaluation strategies. You have to, one of your forms that you have to upload is called the multi-year program design and performance form. We provide that to you in a template, and you have to use it to relate your needs to your goals, to your objectives, to your strategies, to your activities, okay? So even though you're going to answer questions throughout the application, all these questions you should be able to identify them in this multi-year program design and performance form. So this is kind of what it looks like. So you notice you've got your objective, your target percentage, strategies and activities, your data sources and evaluation methods. So what data are you going to collect and how are you going to evaluate? And then your budget. What items are you purchasing to implement these activities that are going to be used to target your objectives and your goals, okay? So again, we give you 6 performance goals. So here's the first performance goal. Students regularly participating in the program will meet or exceed state and local academic achievement standards in math and English language arts. And then for the first 3 performance goals, we give you required objectives, but you can add to those objectives if you choose to. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next slide because it shows them a little bit better, or one of the future slides does. So I kind of got skipped ahead of myself. So this goes over what the difference is between goals and objectives are. I'm not going to go into that because we're running out of time. This goes over those 6 performance goals that we require. And then here we go into those objectives. So for performance goal 1, which I read to you a second ago, here are the required objectives. 50% of regular program participants will show a minimum of 10% growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year on district-provided benchmark assessments in mathematics. And then 45% of regular program participants will improve their mathematics performance level on state standardized assessments from the prior year to current year. And then those 2 are basically repeated, but for English language arts and reading. Please understand that these are requirements from the feds. They're requirements for the state, but they're also federal requirements as part of that GEPRA data that has to be collected and submitted. So that's one of the reasons why we have these specific objectives. And then here's the required objectives for performance goals 2 and 3. Give you a chance to read those. These are the same as they were last year for the last grant. And these are basically about attendance and performance, and student behavior. Okay. And then you also you'll have to develop your own objectives for the performance goals 4 through 6, which is the holistic health and wellness, service learning, and parent and family engagement. So we don't write those for you because we feel like those are going to be very specific based off of your community needs and your student needs. And so we didn't write those for you. So you will need to write a SMART goal, or at least one SMART performance goal, but hopefully more than that, for these 4 you have to write objectives for these performance goals. Now, please keep in mind that you can add objectives to the first 3. It's just if you want to, you don't have to. But if you have specific needs that you want to address in your program and they fall under one of those performance goals, then please feel free to add additional performance objectives if you would like to. But for goals 4 through 6, you do have to write your own objectives. And they should be measurable. They should be, meet those SMART guidelines. Okay. All right, then in component 3B, we ask you to describe the strategies and activities that you're going to use to meet those goals and objectives. And again, you have to tie them to each other in that multi-year program design and performance form. So this is the specific questions that is in the application that you have to answer. I'm not going to read this for you because you can pause it yourself and come back and look at it and then ask questions at upcoming office hour meetings. All right. Component 3C, these are the questions that are asked in that part of the application. This is about student and family support. All right. Component 3D is evaluation strategies. So this is how you're going to evaluate your activities to see if they are actually making a difference in your student achievement. Again, you'll notice that whatever you put in the application has to also be tied in that multi-year program design and performance form. Okay. All right, component 4 is about management. These are the questions you'll find. Well, hold on, let's see. This is not the questions. Oh, wait, yeah, it is. So you must provide a narrative that fully explains. Yep. So this is what component 4 asks you to answer. Here's the next part of component 4. All right. This is component 4B. So you have so component 4 is broken into a part A and a part B. This is part B. And then these are the questions for the rest of part B, component 4, part B. Okay. Component 5 of the application is adequacy of resources and sustainability. So it is also broken into parts. So part A, here are the questions you'll find in part A. Okay. It's a continuation of part A. Notice it asks you to briefly address specific safety measures and plans. Let me move this out of the way. Just like that. All right. And then this is component 5, part B, which asks about your detailed transportation plan. All right. And then component 5, part C is about sustainability. This is where you're going to talk about your sustainability plan, what you would do if your funding went away. All right. And then component 6 is your timeline of activities and project weekly schedule. These are actually forms that you have to fill out. So you don't necessarily answer questions within the application. You just fill out these forms. So you have a form 7 and a form 8. One is a timeline of activities and one is your project weekly schedule. So if you're doing both a academic year and a summer project, then you need to upload one of these for both. Okay. And then finally, you have your application budget. Last year in our cohort 26, we had a section where you had to kind of give a summary of your application budget, but then you still had to go into the application budget portion of the application and create your budget. And so this year we just eliminated that kind of double work by we're going to remove the application budget summary and just ask you to put everything into your application budget. Just be certain that you explain, you use your budget narratives. So when I say application budget, I mean, you go in and create an expense, you pick the appropriate object code and function code for that budgeted item, and then you have a narrative where you describe what the item is that you're budgeting. So I would suggest for this purpose, you be more probably more detailed in your budget narrative than you typically would, because we don't want you to have to do it in 2 different places. Okay. All right. But again, you still relate those budgeted items also to your multi-year program design and performance form. So if you say that you're going to pay for someone to come in and provide ballet instruction, it's the first thing that popped in my head, then you should show that expense on that Form 9 in your holistic health and wellness goals and objectives. They should be tied to your holistic health and wellness, right? So each thing that you spend money on in your budget should be tied to one of your goals and objectives and the activities that you're planning to meet those goals and objectives, all right? Okay. Again, we reserve the right to disqualify, disallow, and negotiate costs associated with any line item proposed in your budget. So you may get the grant, but just understand that once you've gotten the grant, we at the ALSDE go back through your budget and have to approve it. So we look for things that you may have put in there that were great ideas, but not allowable or maybe unreasonable. And we will ask you to make adjustments to your budget until it gets in compliance. And then we will approve your budget and you can start spending funds. Okay. All right. The RFA does go into details about the appropriate function codes and object codes that you should use. But just keep in mind these following limits. Professional development may not exceed 10%. Your cost for your external evaluator can't be more than $6,000 or 3%. Transportation costs may not exceed 30%, and administrative and indirect costs together may not exceed 30%. All right, then you've got some appendices, and then the different forms that have to be submitted. I'll let you read these later because we've run out of time, and I want to be able to address your questions. So here's the different forms. These are all pretty much the same as last year, except this year we're not making you submit a resume for your program director. And this year we're being more specific about those job descriptions because we had a lot of people that didn't submit all their job descriptions like they should have. We do provide you with an example job description for a program director and a site coordinator, but please understand that's just an example. You can change it however you need to, and we don't expect you to just re-upload the exact example that we gave you. You should make it your own. All right, and here's the deadline and submission reminders. So the application is due by 11:59 p.m. on February 27th. Please understand that the system shuts off its submission after 11:59 p.m. And so if you're late, that's it. You don't get to apply. Okay. So please don't wait until the day of to start submitting things. I wouldn't even wait till like a few days before. I would try to make my goal to submit my application at least a week in advance. And that way, because it has to go through a chain of command for approvals, and you don't want one person being sick or their computer not working or for them losing power or whatever to hold you up because they can't hit that approval button from you after all that work you did not to be able to finally submit your application. So please don't wait to the last minute to submit. And we've had that happen this past year. We had all kinds of reasons why people didn't get their application in by the deadline. And we just had to say, I'm sorry that the rules, we're sticking by the rules. So please, please, please don't wait till the last minute. They all have to be done through eGap. We don't take any kind of hard copies. The application should originate from you. Please do not plagiarize from the internet or other grants. Only attach materials that we've asked for, and understand that the applications will not be returned to you. So you should keep a copy of your application for your records for future grant programs. We cannot guarantee that we'll be able to give you access to those once we've awarded the awards and gone through final appeals and that sort of thing, that you'll be able to have access to them in the future. All right, I'm going to go, I think that's it. So I'm going to go through and see what questions we have in the chat and see if I answered them. Okay. Okay. One question was about if you're writing for a year-long and summer program, do you figure the school year and summer separately? Yes, you do. So it's like the Cohort 26 application. If you saw it, it asks you, this would be in component 1. It'll ask you, are you having an academic year program? And if you are, you click the box and it makes the funding, what is the word? I love it when my brain just quits working. It makes that calculation. Thank you. It makes the funding calculation pop up. And then it asks you, are you having a summer program? And when you click yes on that one, it makes a separate funding calculation pop up for it. So it's 2 separate calculations that you do, one for summer and one for the academic year. Okay. Already answered that one. Our program's allowed to operate Monday through Thursdays and eliminate Fridays due to busing, transportation reasons, small district football games, few drivers. They can for middle and high school. Typically, the answer to that would be no for an elementary. I don't know if I read that where everybody could hear what I was saying. I'm sorry. The question is, are programs allowed to operate Monday through Thursday and eliminate Fridays due to busing or transportation? Reason being, it's a small district. They have football games on Fridays. They don't have enough drivers, etc. So typically, if you're a middle or high school, you can do that without any problem. Elementary school, the answer to that would be no typically, but if you have a really good justification, then you could reach out to your ALSDE specialist and get pre-approval for that. We will definitely take any requests into consideration to see if they're reasonable or not. I've already talked about how I'm going to figure out what if you're a K through 12 school with those minimum hours. Okay, so I'll look at that and hopefully go over that in our next office hours. Is there any new template contract for people employed using grant funds, teachers, teaching assistants, or do we continue to use the one our LEA provides? Because these are federal funds, you need to use the template that we provide to you. Now, you can use your LEA's contract, but it has to have all of those federal provisions in there, which a lot of them don't. So if your LEA has a specific contract template for federal funds, then that's fine. Just make sure it has all those federal provisions, but we're finding that a lot don't. So we just recommend that you use the template that we give to you in the application. Where can we locate all the forms and templates to download to start on now? I still need to, that's the one thing I haven't finished yet. I worked till 9 o'clock every night last week until 4:30 in the morning this morning to try to get the RFA completed, but that's the only thing I haven't finished is the updating the forms. But the contract templates and things like that probably won't change. Those can already be found in eGap. if you go and look at another application, which the public does have access to, but I'm not sure if you have access to those forms. But as soon as I get them updated, we will get those downloaded or uploaded to our new website. And we'll try to send out a email notification letting you guys know that those are there. So, but just keep in mind that those forms aren't official until the RFA has been approved, but, you know, more than likely there won't be any changes really to those forms other than potentially a year, a date, something like that. So they should be fine for you to go ahead and start using. But if you want to just be safe and wait until the RFA is actually approved and been released, then that might be the wisest thing to do. It's just totally up to you. But we will go ahead and provide like the draft of those forms for you as soon as possible. Can you ask for less than the calculation determines you're eligible for? Yes, that is one of the questions in there. So underneath where it calculates the amount for you of how much you're eligible for, like one of the next questions is, do you want to request the entire amount you're eligible for or less? And if you pick less, then you can put in the amount you want to request. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, a lot of you may have to use that because the fastest way for me to get this application available to you for cohort 27 is to make as few changes to it from last year's application as possible. I know some changes do have to be made, but changes like that are going to take longer to implement than me just changing the wording in a question. And so what I'm trying to say is last year, the maximum was 500,000, which I think it would even let you go above it then. And you still had to understand that even if you qualified for more than 500,000, you would only be eligible for a lesser amount. So basically what I'm trying to say is if you do the system automatically calculates for you what you're eligible for, but there's not like a rule in place to set up a warning if you go over the maximum amount. The maximum amount of the grant. And so you would need to, in that lower line, put the actual amount that you want or that you qualify for in the next question below. But we'll talk about that when we go over the EGAP application, which we'll do as soon as it opens up to the public. All right, any other questions? All right, again, if you have not joined the RFA, please be sure to do so because I don't want to keep emailing everybody about this grant who may or may not be interested in it. I just want to send out notifications to those who we know are interested in the grant. So, so we're very soon going to just resort to it for our email list. So please make sure you get on that listserv. All right, our next office hours, I'm going to scroll up to the timeline. All right, our next office hours will be on December 9th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. for about an hour. You do not have to join us. We will record the meeting, but it is an opportunity for you to come in and ask questions about the grant. We highly recommend for you to attend if possible, but if you're not able to attend, we highly recommend that you watch the recording later. And we will try to post the recording of today's meeting on the website. We're not going to keep sending those out in email, but we will post it to the 21st Century website for you to have access to that. And it will be posted in this timeline. So just like I posted the link to last week's meeting here, I'll change this this meeting location to the link to the recording on the website. All right. Well, we'll see you guys all next week on December 9th. We hope you have a good evening. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting for today. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us.